Here's an article from the Business Insider from August 2020. And Bill Gates issued a stark warning for the world. As awful as this pandemic is, climate change could be worse. I find this interesting, how they always jump from the one to the other. So, is this preparatory for something else? Now, when we think about climate change, I always think of Laudato Si.
Yes.
Now, didn't a Jesuit write that too?
Correct.
Or at least his Jesuit superiors, whoever they are.
Well,
they're all together in this. So they write this article. And what is ensconced in that article?
Sunday keeping.
Sunday
legislation.
So the next step. So if you get the enforcement issue in place using one set of techniques, which is linked to a health issue. But as we've seen, it's probably also a moral issue. So now they're saying, okay, so the climate change is going to be worse. So then we also need that moral directive. So it's just one more step, isn't it? Okay. Gates is once again urging preparedness for a potentially devastating emergency. As awful as this pandemic is, climate change could be worse, Gates said in a blog published on Tuesday. If you want to understand the kind of damage that climate change will inflict, look at COVID-19 and spread the pain out over a much longer period of time. The loss of life and economic misery caused by this pandemic are on a par with what will happen regularly if we do not eliminate the world's carbon emissions. This man is a genius on every level. He's an immunization expert. He is an entrepreneur. He's a microchip expert, and now he's a climate expert as well. I wonder whether he could become a Sunday keeping expert as well. So we have some very interesting things in the pipeline. Bottom line, is it a moral issue, vaccination, or is it not? So let's just listen to what our friend Tucker has to say on the issue.
So we got a new benchmark for when we can get back to normal, when we get a vaccine. Everything will be fine once we can vaccinate against COVID-19. Many in authority told us that. They're still telling us that. The state of Virginia has announced that when a vaccine finally does arrive, it will be mandatory. Not all vaccines. Virginia will not require vaccines for hepatitis or HIV. They won't require a vaccine for meningitis either, despite the fact that meningitis kills a lot more, say, college students than coronavirus does. But once we get a corona vaccine, they're telling us, all will be well. But now they've changed that. Not true anymore. According to a new announcement from the World Health Organization, a vaccine, even if we get one, will not be the end of all of this. It will never end. You can get your injection, they'll make you get it, but you'll still be under arrest. The World Health Organization says that finding a vaccine is not the goal. Reordering society is the goal. Quote, we cannot go back to the way things were. That's a direct quote from the leader of the World Health Organization, Dr. Tedros, who, by the way, is not really a doctor. Because COVID-19 is not a public health crisis, really, or even a mere virus. According to Tedros, COVID-19 is, in fact, and this may surprise you, COVID-19 is really about global warming. As he puts it, quote, the COVID-19 pandemic has given new impetus to the need to accelerate efforts to respond to climate change. I bet you didn't see that coming. Bill Gates did. He agrees with it wholeheartedly. Earlier this month, Gates posted an essay to his personal website, which you probably haven't seen, arguing that the lesson of the corona pandemic is that the rest of us will have to sacrifice even more to save the Earth from warming. Now, for people who are not billionaire global influencers, this is all pretty confusing. Quick, what does the coronavirus have to do with climate change? Well, for one thing, China caused both of them. That's the obvious link. But that is definitely not the point Dr. Tedros and Bill Gates are making. Both of them bow before China. They would never meaningfully criticize the Chinese government. So you can be assured that's not the connection they're drawing. No. For Dr. Tedros and Bill Gates, pandemic and climate change share a very different connection. Both are useful pretexts for mass social control. Both are essentially unsolvable crises they can harness to bypass democracy and force powerless populations to obey their commands. How would a rational person assess global warming? If you really believe that carbon emissions were distorting the Earth's climate, and that's the claim they make, maybe they're right, then you would take a very close look at the forces behind those carbon emissions. You would ask hard questions about the global economy. You'd wonder, who's profiting from this system that's destroying the Earth? How exactly do the richest, most powerful people in the world, that would be big finance and the tech monopolies, contribute to carbon emissions? That would be the first question you would ask. That's the logical way to think about climate change. And if you began to think that way, you might wind up concluding that people like, I don't know, Michael Bloomberg were in fact climate criminals. Their private jets alone produce more carbon emissions a year than entire African villages do, not to mention more than your neighborhood does, a lot more. But tellingly, no one on the environmental left ever criticizes Michael Bloomberg. He's considered a leader in the fight against climate change. Here's another data point for you that you won't see on television. Less than a month ago, on July 31st, the CDC, Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta, our primary public health organization, funded by the federal government, released guidelines to state health departments about patients infected with the coronavirus. How do you track the spread of this disease? In a footnote in the release, the CDC acknowledged that researchers lack evidence that, quote, masks offer any protection against coronavirus, any, at all. As health officials work to track the spread of the virus, the CDC suggested that they ignore whether or not people were wearing masks. In other words, wearing a mask may be completely irrelevant to the spread of the virus. Huh? So there is still no proof that masks protect us against COVID-19? That is apparently the conclusion the CDC reached. It's not something Trump tweeted. The CDC put that in a release to the states. It seems like a blockbuster story. Why isn't that on page 1 of the New York Times? Why is the entire media, the entire leadership class of the United States of America ignoring this? Masks are obligatory. They're mandatory everywhere. Just the other day, Joe Biden announced that if he's elected, you'll be required to wear a mask when you're alone outside. What is going on? You know what's going on. Fear works. The more afraid you are, the more you will accept. Again, a feature of human nature. The more cut off you are from your family and your friends, the more power they have to control you.